Louisville takes it to Clemson. 33-21 is your final score. The Clemson Tigers are asked to throw the ball 56 times. They're asked to convert on third down 23 times. This is a crazy game. I mean, it could be summarized by, Jeff Brom in some of these big games, and you saw last year with Notre Dame, a couple explosive plays in the run game can do wonders for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't seem like, if you kind of box score snipe, this doesn't seem like a dominant win, right, for Louisville, but they controlled a lot of that football game. They really did, especially in those first three quarters. It was disappointing as a guy who holds a Clemson ACC ticket, as a guy that took Clemson, a guy that put him on my best bets at the counter this week. It was disappointing. I thought I would get more from Klubnik in this passing offense, more consistency with Moore healthy, with Wesco healthy, right, with Williams there, and bringing all the tight end. You had, I've thought, a lot of weapons to be able to use and attack this Louisville defense, which we saw Miami a couple weeks ago really give a ton of problems. And yet here we are, and Clemson had 7 points through three quarters, and it was same old, same old. It's been the same story for a couple of years now, where they're playing these good teams and they can't keep up with their offenses. But honestly, a ton of credit goes to Jeff Brom, like you said, a ton of credit to his Louisville team. Tyler Shuck did enough, right? He just did enough. They really relied upon that true freshman, Isaac Brown, who is turning into a monster, not just in the ACC, but also throughout the rest of the country. He is really, really good. And also, yeah, that's if you're Clemson, right, on the same night SMU dominates Pitt, right, same night Miami, looked bad, slept walk through three quarters, and then obviously covered against Duke, right? This is a game that you feel like at home you have to have, especially with that ugly loss against Georgia on your schedule, where you're not really in position to be an at-large 10-2 team. You really aren't, especially with now a double-digit loss to an unranked team at home as a double-digit favorite. Not ideal.
Yeah, not ideal at all. And they need SMU to lose, right? And they need, obviously, Miami, one of those two to lose. I don't know how the tiebreaker situation works out, but it might be a situation where SMU and Miami both have that tiebreaker over Clemson, because I don't know how many conference wins. We've talked about this before in the ACC. I don't know how many of the teams that Clemson has beat. I don't know what their strength of record is, and some of those common opponents. SMU and Clemson both have played against Pitt, at that point. And if they both win, that's not part of it. Like, you'd have to walk down the line. So it seems like Clemson needs a bit of help here. And like you said, they're, not to reiterate exactly what you said, but yeah, they're not in, unless they win and probably win the conference, and even if they don't make the conference championship, there's just no way you can put a 10-2 team that has this bad of a loss on their resume, as well as a blowout loss to, yes, another likely college football playoff team, but we don't even know that Georgia's going to make the college football playoffs. We don't know. They still have a tough schedule ahead of them and some challenges that they got to face. So I guess, yeah, Clemson, with this loss, they're not in the driver's seat. And this was the big win that Jeff Brom was going to get this year. This was the big one. We've been waiting on it. A lot of one-possession games. Reason that I took Louisville to cover the spread, reason I put them in the Dirty Dogs, is because Jeff Brom's playing a lot of close football games this year. And he finds ways to win some big ones sometimes. And, yeah, and I don't think Louisville's had a bye for 6 or 7 straight weeks either. They're impressive performance from the Cardinals here, finding a way to win. Tyler Shuck didn't even need to be a hero. I thought he might need to be. Phil Maffa ran for 100. If you were telling me, oh, yeah, Phil Maffa ran for 170 yards, I would have been like, oh, so how badly did Clemson beat him? Not the case at all. Not the case at all.
Can I ask you this here? Is this more about, Louisville maybe turning a corner, finding an identity offensively and defensively for that matter too? Or is this more about Clemson, and we just they beat up on a lot of bad football teams in the ACC, and that's kind of inflated their stats? Or is it more Louisville side? And to counter that too, or I guess to add on to that, depending on your answer, how concerned are you now for Clemson? Like, I kind of just said, 10-2, but they still have 2 road games in the ACC against Virginia Tech and Pitt, and they also finished the year with South Carolina, who just gave Texas A&M the business, right? What's your concern level? And then 2, is this your takeaways from Louisville and Clemson side? Is this, because you were on Louisville, right? You took Louisville. You were on their Dirty Dogs. Is this? Yeah, I guess explain to me in terms of your outlook for the rest of this. Like, what's your explanation of this game?
Well, I look at this and I'm like, the Clemson could have won this game, right? Louisville's a good football team. Clemson could have won this game, right? Two things are true. Now, yeah, it is concerning that they haven't played a ton of great football teams. I don't know that they got out physical, but there definitely were some flaws that were exposed in terms of their, run defense and maybe susceptibility to giving up some explosive plays there, and also special teams didn't look great. That was an issue. Um, yeah, I'm not super worried about Clemson, in terms of out. Like if they win 10 games, like that's a good season. I mean, maybe
Like,
not
do
what
you
your
still do you think they
goals.
can? You think they still will win 10 games? That's my question here. Because I mean, I know Virginia Tech and Pitt both lost last week, but
I,
those two
I, I
road
think
games.
Clemson will still win 10 games.
Okay,
Like I think, well, Virginia Tech, I know that they didn't have. Well,
Drones.
actually, let me tell you this: that South Carolina game is easily the toughest game I think that they have left on their schedule. So I think they definitely get the 9 wins. I think 10 wins is you're. It's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. I like this Louisville team. Like I told you, I mean I had them in this spot, in the Dirty Dogs, but also I think I do think that there's Clemson is good, but also there's some issues.
Yeah, it's interesting too because if you told me like Clemson, you have Georgia on your schedule, right? Which at this point, with what Clemson is, the program as a team right now, like that's not that it's penciled in as a loss, but I mean, they were double digit. They were like 14-point dogs in that game, right? So it's not like you're expecting to win that game. So to say that you went 10-1 the rest of the way, right? I think it's unfortunately it's kind of a win right now for Clemson. I know the program has had high expectations in the last decade, right? I get that. You've seen national championships, you've seen first round quarterbacks. I get that. But to be honest, like 10-1, if you finish the rest of the season that way, yes, is it a missed opportunity because you absolutely could have been sitting in the ACC championship game? Absolutely, but it's also 10 wins is going to keep Dabo Sweeney his job. It really is, and I don't know if it's going to make him drastically change the way he feels about himself, about his program, and what he thinks is his virtues of Clemson's football program.
And generally, like you're now that they're split up in, they don't no longer have divisions. One conference loss can sometimes get you in the conference championship in the ACC. It just happens to be that SMU maybe got the easiest schedule in the entire ACC, aside from possibly Virginia Tech, but Virginia Tech even has to play Clemson, and Miami also kind of got the benefit of that as well. So it's interesting, and they're out of conference, right? It was obviously unequal because Clemson has to play Georgia and South Carolina. So I think there's an unequal schedule right there. I think Clemson would give Miami problems. I think Clemson and Miami would be a great matchup right there. I think it would be very competitive. I think Clemson would beat SMU. That's my opinion, even though SMU is a very hot football team right now. I just felt I was amused by this spot. And Jeff Brom is, like we've talked about, one of the best coaches in the entire country. So it's
Yeah,
like, it's not a bummer to lose Jeff Brom. Ryan Day has lost to Jeff Brom, you know? I mean, like, come on.
PJ
PJ,
Fleck has lost to Jeff
PJ Fleck has lost to Jeff Brom. Elite
Market.
coaches.
Yeah, a lot of the ACC, and they're going to come to know that too. And I think they already do. I think he's got a lot of respect, and we want to push that narrative because yeah, he's fantastic. But also that team, I like Louisville. And their schedule looking forward. You got Stanford right after a much needed bye week, like you said. They played a lot of football recently. Bye week, and then they finished on the road across the country against Stanford. Pitt, who looked very vulnerable this past weekend, and on the road to your rival Kentucky, who is again and not going bowling. So it's definitely there for him to finish with 9 wins, and that again would be a super successful season, I think, for Jeff Brom.